Welcome to week 4 of our ECE 127 Classroom Management course. We will be reviewing chapters 3 and 4 as well as Conscious Discipline sessions 2 and 3. Let's start by looking at our calendar. You have concluded week 4, which included Conscious Discipline 2, Discussion Board 2, and your Engagement and Participation 2. Today is Saturday, September 19th. So make sure that you're staying on pace with the course calendar and staying ahead so that if you have questions that you can connect with a classmate or your course instructor. For example, if something's due on Tuesday, you preferably want to look at it by Sunday and send an email or make a phone call so that you can connect and get a response back in a timely manner. Chapter 3 talks about, is titled A Key to Guiding Children Effectively. And so there's 3 things that we need to know as educators before we can start to guide children effectively. And while before is emphasized here, I would encourage you to continue to do self-assessment of these 3 things. So, number 1, knowledge. We need to understand characteristics of children's development. It's why in your programs that you take general psychology, child development, and your methods courses and other things that reinforce your knowledge of applying what we know about child development. We need to have skills to know how to use a variety of positive guidance strategies. So your textbook is talking about it, and we're going to continue to make those connections with your conscious discipline review and assessments. Finally, attitude, willingness to use appropriate guidance strategies, right? Very basically, it means that you're walking into work and into your classroom every day with a positive attitude, with a mindfulness of keeping in mind the previous 2, knowledge and skills, right? Reinforce your attitude and willingness to approach individual children and use the guidance strategies that are appropriate for individual development as well as the classroom as a whole, the group, right? Thinking about individual and group characteristics, temperaments, etc. So I want you to pause and just make a few notes and ask yourself, how do these things relate to conscious discipline? What connections are you making? Write those 2 things down. You can pause the video and you'll see that there's evidence as we move forward with that. Okay, welcome back. Continuing with chapter 3. Factors that affect teachers' guidance is your perception and your memory, and also the children's perception and the children's memory. So perception is the process of organizing information obtained through the senses, right? And a really good example of this is one's perception is their own, right? But if you can only see something and you cannot hear the conversation that's happening with the event, then your perception of that event could be skewed, right? So think about this in a classroom. You're in the classroom and you're seeing something happening in the far left corner of the classroom in the block area with 2 or 3 children, but you cannot hear what's happening. And one child might go and hit another child. It's really good that you have that full picture. And that's why we talk about the fact that you need to walk over to that group of children. You need to get down on their level. You need to be looking respectfully, responsively, and reciprocally with your interactions, verbally and non-verbally. So again, let's go back. Perception, the process of organizing information obtained through senses. One of the factors that affects your guidance strategies. Memory, basic cognitive process which children store information and then later retrieve it. right? So think about your memory. If you're constantly reflecting that Timmy has challenging times playing with Samantha, right? What happens when Timothy and Samantha start doing well together, or they even have a 10-minute positive exchange? Reflect again and start to alter that memory, moving towards the positive, right? So the question here is, how can each of these cognitive skills be assessed with young children? So while we started talking about yourself as a teacher and how these affect your guidance, switch the page, turn the page now, and think about how each of these cognitive skills can be assessed with young children. So this is important so that you can toggle back and forth, right? Knowing what your perception and memory is, but also understanding child development and how children's perception and memory develop, what ages, understanding that there's going to be a spectrum of development with the age group that they're teaching, and then thinking about how you can assess this with young children. And it's not an individual task. Assessing children, we know, has to involve everybody in your classroom. Chapter 3 continues on, and so with social cognition, it refers to how children think about behavior, motives, or intentions of others. So this involves 2 stages of cognitive development when we talk about children between the ages of 2 and 12. So looking at pre-operational thinkers and concrete operational thinkers, looking at this chart, right, describing others. If they're in pre-operational stage, they describe another person by referring to physical qualities. That's nice. You're pretty. I like your dress. Whereas a concrete operational thinker, they use fewer concrete terms and begin using broad psychological terms to describe. I like it when you did that. That makes me happy, right? Going down to the next one, understanding accidents or intentional behavior, and finally viewing friendship. And again, I would encourage you to hit pause here and review this chart so that you have an understanding of the progression between pre-operational and concrete operational. Remember that you are reading the full chapter, right? Starting with the beginning and looking at the beginning of each chapter at your learning outcomes, the NACE standards and key elements, as well as the case studies. And then within the chapter, most chapters, but chapter 3 absolutely does include the working with the families, which is a green highlighted text box. And last week when we met, we talked about the cultural scripts and guiding children, which is the green text box. These are important and relate the information you're reading to the practical application that's so important. So remember to review these chapter highlights. So here we break out into breakout rooms, looking at pages 74 and 75, which again is the working with families highlight. And each of the teams will look at one of the actionable suggestions for families. So again, I'm encouraging you to hit pause. This is a good opportunity. If you're a note taker, continue to take notes. Maybe add them to the notes you took after reading the chapter. So the first one to look at is cooperative game ideas. And that's number 2 on the list. Although they're not listed in numerical order, they're bulleted points. Team 2, participate in social behaviors. That's altruism, number 4. And then finally, how do we bolster parents' confidence? So if you can review each of these, thinking about the tips that are provided, and then what is one actionable suggestion that you would provide families? All right, moving on to chapter 4. This is supportive physical environments. And first we're going to talk about indirect guidance. So age-appropriate room design is based on theory, child development theory, space design theory, and it includes a couple of things. Sense of order. It needs to be well arranged, tidy, organized. The room needs to convey order and comfort for children. If they feel that they're in an organized, routine, safe environment with a sense of order, then they're going to be more likely to explore and in turn learn. Social interaction, set up to promote interaction among children. Making choices, also want to set it up so children can learn and practice how to make wise choices. And then active learning, encouraging active learning. And here I would say, combine those last three. How we have the room set up, promoting social interaction while they're making choices, positive choices, and they're allowed to have that active learning, that open-ended learning, right? So again, thinking about some of these, if I'm making choices, the room is set up so that there are choices to be had that are developmentally appropriate. So let's use a toddler room example here. In a toddler room, I'm typically going to have 2 or 3 choices. And in a toddler room, I might have 2 or 3 red trucks. They may even look the same. Or I may have 3 trucks, but they're red, yellow, and blue. Whereas in a preschool room, I'm going to have 3 different types of vehicles. Right? Because we know developmentally toddlers, when they want something, they want something. And as at their cognitive level, they see a red truck and they want that red truck. So provide them multiples. Whereas in a preschool room, they have now learned that the term vehicle, and vehicles can be a car, can be a truck, can be a van. And you're providing options down that they are going from assimilation to accommodation. And remember, they've gone from a truck is a truck is a truck to accommodation, which means they're foldering and they understand that vehicles come in different shapes and sizes. Guidelines for developmentally appropriate rooms. This is part of your reading. I'm not going to continue to read all of this, so please hit pause. If you have not yet read the chapter, certainly it expands upon it. So if you haven't read, I'm again encouraging you to hit pause at this point and read this. And then thinking about organizing your classroom areas. And the textbook gives you great images and suggestions, tables and graphs about individual small group and large group areas for your classroom. Within the textbook, there is an image of a preschool classroom, and recognizing that this image is quite blurry being transferred to this slide. It's on page 87. So again, pause, write down, what are your initial thoughts of this preschool classroom design? Don't look at the textbook, just look at the classroom design itself, okay? And then thinking about, still referencing that same page, thinking about 2 aspects of the design that you like and why you like it. What is it about this design that you like, that you maybe would incorporate into your own classroom? And then find one area or one part of the design that you would redesign and what your suggestion would be for that redesign. Right? This would have been a breakout session, so consider how maybe you want to connect with a classmate with this. And I just want to remind you all that this chapter in particular is going to support your classroom plan development project. So after reading the chapter, review the assessment supplement again, utilize the chapter information, and certainly the textbook in this chapter can become one of your references. So questions on chapter 3 and 4, I'm going to encourage you to bring it with you when we meet next time, week 6. Right? So keep your notes, right? Highlight any questions you have. You could also email me if that's helpful to stay current with what you're reading. This is the end of part 1 of our week 4 Zoom video. So please conclude and then know that there'll be part 2.